money laundering scheme between Mexico's Sinaloa drug cartel and Chinese brokers, while seizing millions of dollars in drugs, including 300 pounds of cocaine.
Money laundering.
The fentanyl drug trafficker.
Money laundering. A raid in an exclusive South
Es
Florida.
sind mittlerweile tonnenweise Drogen, die auch in deutschen Häfen ankommen.
Drug traffickers need to transfer money along the whole supply chain. They need to take money from the buyers to the vendors and then back to the drug producers. This flow of so-called dirty money needs to be disguised as legal transactions to appear as legitimate as possible and avoid detection. This process is known as money laundering. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime estimates that global money laundering accounts for approximately 2.7% of the global GDP. Not all of this is related to drugs, but proceeds from drug trafficking are usually considered the largest source of illicit funds in need of money laundering. Before we start, hi, my name is Julia. I'm a certified anti-money laundering specialist. In my day job, I help reporting entities comply with anti-money laundering requirements. And here on YouTube, I talk about everything there is to know about money laundering and anti-money laundering. If you're interested on this topic, please consider supporting the channel by subscribing. It is not surprising that the first international treaty on money laundering was the United Nations Convention against illicit traffic in narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances, commonly known as the 1988 Vienna Convention. The Vienna Convention requires signatory states to criminalize the laundering of proceeds from drug trafficking. This means that states must adopt laws that make it illegal to disguise or conceal the origin of money gained through illegal drug trafficking. The Vienna Convention set up the framework for modern anti-money laundering practices, as it laid down the pillars of anti-money laundering, which are seizure and confiscation of proceeds of crimes, international cooperation, and preventative measures like customer identification, record keeping, and reporting suspicious transactions to national authorities. The Vienna Convention was primarily aimed at combating drug-related money laundering, but it encouraged signatories to consider other predicate offenses, where predicate offense means a crime that serves as the underlying criminal act that generates funds for a subsequent crime, like money laundering. A general misconception is that money laundering happens after a crime. While we should think about money laundering more as a cycle of predicate offense, money laundering, another predicate offense, and so on. This is because criminals reinvest the funds that they have previously laundered in their criminal activities. It is always hard to study criminal activities due to their underground nature, but we have some empirical evidence. The Australian Institute for Criminology published a study that links data on organized crime groups known to Australian law enforcement with suspicious meta-reports submitted to the Australian Transaction Reports and Analysis Centre, also called AUSTRAC, which is the watchdog for anti-money laundering in Australia. The study shows that organized crime groups involved in money laundering were 1.7 times more likely to have a recorded organized crime offense, and organized crime groups involved in money laundering were responsible for 2.5 times as much crime-related harm as groups not involved in money laundering. The study concluded that the increase in money laundering preceded an increase in crime-related harm, suggesting that the relationship was due to the reinvestment of illicit funds in future criminal enterprises. One money laundering scheme that more than other shows the cyclical relationship between predicate crimes and money laundering is the so-called Vancouver Model. It is called in this way because it was first unveiled by British Columbian law enforcement. Since its discovery, the scheme has been used countless times in other jurisdictions, and it looked like this. A person, let's call her Mary, wants to move a large amount of money out of their country. For example, China has strict rules in relation to getting money out of the country, and Mary wants to find a way around that. Mary finds a criminal group in China who has connections with another criminal group abroad, let's say in Australia. Mary transferred the funds to the criminal group in China and then travels to Australia. The criminal group in China arranges for their associate in Australia to deliver the equivalent amount of the original transfer to Mary, who is now in Australia. The money given to Mary is usually dirty cash that the group in Australia needed to launder. Mary goes to a casino in Australia and exchanges the dirty cash into chips. She engages in minimal gambling and then cash out the chips. This money is now clean, and this technique is called cash in, cash out. I talk more about it in another video, along with the complex relationship between Australian law enforcement and casinos. Check it out if you're interested. I'll leave you a link. With the scheme, the cash never leaves the either jurisdiction, but the value of the money is transferred. Now Mary has brought cash out of China, circumventing the cash export laws, but at the same time, the criminal group in Australia had also transferred the funds to their associate in China. This is particularly relevant because China is a hub for manufacturing of fentanyl, which then gets exported abroad, especially in rich countries like Australia. Once the fentanyl is sold in Australia, part of the profit needs to be sent back to China to buy raw materials, pay the workers, and prepare the next batch of. Money laundering is not a victimless crime. It fuels more and more criminal activities. In particular, more than other criminal offenses, drug production and drug trafficking are inextricably linked to money laundering. We have a lot of measures in place to try and fight drug trafficking and money laundering, but the problem will stay until we legalize all drugs and put an end to the monopoly of criminal organizations into the drug market. Looking back, we all agree on how unnecessary and harmful alcohol prohibitionism was, and yet here we are doing exactly the same now. Some countries are moving towards the liberalization of some drugs, but this is not enough until it's a concerted effort. Since the 1970s, the Netherlands have promoted laws aimed at retaining soft drug activities in the open, where they can be regulated, taxed, and controlled. This has resulted in the creation of a massive industry in the Netherlands, generating billions of dollars in revenues every year. For example, 4 billion euros were estimated in 2020. But this success is not deprived of controversies, because while coffee shops are legal, the supplies often come from organized crimes and is manufactured abroad. As a consequence, between 15 and 30 billion euros are laundered every year in the Netherlands, and the cycle continues. This is all for me now. Comment, like, subscribe, you know the usual. Let me know what you think about legalization of drugs, and did you know about the Vancouver model before today? My name is Julia from Total AML. I'll see you on the next one.